Johannesburg. The time is exactly 20 minutes past 7 o'clock, and you are tuned in to the General Public Affair. As you know, in a nutshell, the General Public Affair is the public, by the public, for the public. And we are still in our brand new feature, which is called African Insights. And I'm not alone in studio. I've got Tony, who is my expert, should I say, when it comes to African history and philosophy.
Expert is a very risky word, but I'd like to say I know a little to say something. You know.
So you can join in the conversation at UJFM, at Smurfzinto, hashtag the General Public Affair, hashtag African Insights. And the burning question this evening is, what is Africa or African? It is highly unlikely that there is a single South African who is not aware of the call to decolonize South African universities, the Rhodes Must Fall or the Fees Must Fall campaign that have characterized South African universities since 2015 and 2016. These activities took place at the university precisely because there are the places where new knowledge is created, existing knowledge is transmitted, and outdated knowledge is challenged. Questioning and challenging existing knowledge is how thinking changes, how new knowledge is created, and so the debates these events have generated are essential to our campuses and to the creation of new ways of thinking about who and where we are in our particular history and what is Africa and what is to be an African. So I'd like to know, because from you, Tony, because African Insights is also being introduced as a module within the University of Johannesburg.
Yeah.
So could you please just tell us more about that?
So at the moment, African Insights is just started at its pilot phase, where we are getting first year students to join and participate in various discussions, partake in reading certain texts which are important to developing a kind of critical stance and also a evaluative stance of what is Africa and what it means to be African. And currently, with this very first week, we are dealing with certain texts from Frantz Fanon, the Wretched Earth, and also Mudimbe, which I mentioned just a second ago. And basically, we are allowing students to take a peek into some of these texts, because these things are very dense. These texts are very dense. So we try provide students with enough of a gateway to these texts and these kind of very Africanized ways of thinking, ideologies, and various ways of viewing the world. And the outcome, hopefully the outcome is to start this discussion, this discourse about what it is to be African and what it means to decolonize. Because everyone seems to be interested in the project of decolonizing, but are we clear as to what it is that we want to do and what our goals are and who we are, our own identity?
So I'd like to know what is the main aim of African Insights? Because I'd like to know, what does decolonizing mean to you? Because for me, I feel like it's not merely the dropping of statues must fall, or the renaming of institutional buildings. I think decolonization has to go deeper, even when it comes to our education system. How do we sort of like change our educational content and make it Afrocentric?
So this is where it starts. With these discussions, we need to kind of get people talking. And I think African Insights begins at that level. It gets the students talking and thinking about these issues. So African Insights opens the student up to various ways of looking at university material. We don't have even the same setup as normal kind of classes. We have a very unique way of dealing with disseminating information and allowing students to also have a voice. And what we are trying to do is treat this as a completely new thing. It's not your technical in-class, write this, get a mark for that. At the moment, we are trying to kind of generate a discussion.
A discussion.
Yes.
Yeah, but I'd like to know from you, what does decolonizing our universities mean? So that as a student listening out there, I understand fully what decolonizing means. Does it only mean changing a name of a building? how deep does it go so that we'll know if we have achieved decolonization within our institutions?
Yeah.
And obviously, I don't think we can fully decolonize our universities within an instant.
Yeah.
It has to be a journey, and even changing like our curriculums and our educational content or academic content and try and making it Afrocentric. I think that's a journey. So if we are decolonizing, is there Afrocentric content already there to be introduced within our institutions?
Well, in terms of content, there's quite a lot of content out there that is very Africanized. I don't know if I am happy with the Afrocentric term.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of content which comes from Africa, which is indigenous to Africa and is very nuanced because it comes from Africa. And what we want to do is bring this forward to the students, because in university you're given a set standard of content and you're given a set way of dealing with the content. So what we want to do is not only change the content, but change the way of disseminating the content, because there's a very methodical difficulty in doing westernized kind of traditions in an African context. And what we want to do is possibly, or I think decolonization should do, is not only change the content, but change the way in which we teach the content, change the way in which we view the content, and change not just the content, but also the structures behind what brings about the content. So we need to show like a plural South African kind of life where we have various races, sexes, all that stuff, genders, my bad, genders, and a variety of Africanism. We want that to come out and bring itself to the surface so that we can start discussing what it means to be African. And to decolonize, it's not a project of one thing. It's a project that involves everything. And it's sad that we see decolonization as simply a university thing. Whereas decolonization involves high school, it involves primary school, it involves post-university. It just happens that university is the boiling pot of it all. As you mentioned already, it's the place where we can critically engage with these things. It's the place in which we can be provided with new and old information and see how we view that and how we understand that.
I like the way you described the fact that decolonizing is very complex and vast. But now, how would we know by the certain time that when we say we've achieved decolonization, what kind of country or society would be a decolonized society, according to you?
So for me, it would be one which kind of puts forward indigenous African values, things like Ubuntu, and puts those at the forefront before and allows those things to guide us in the way we view each other and in the way we view information and the way we view the world. Certain African values which, if we look back into our history, were common but now are non-existent. If we can reculture people, I hate using that word, but if we could bring that back to the forth and allow people to see the value of Africa and its values, and then from there say, okay, we have had a phase of colonialism and neo-colonialism, but if we look at some of the African things that were done before colonialism, what can help us improve and take us out of this rut that we've been put in by colonialism? And there is our starting point, where we can look back and look forward using Africa.
But now, I have a problem with reflecting back, because when we look at our history, because as you know, history is always written by the victor. And we've been living our lives based on information from European or Eurocentric archives. So, and I believe that there is information from your Afro or Afro-Asian archives. So where do we even source the real history? And how do you distinguish whether this history is true or this history is not?
Excuse me. The first thing I'd like to say with that is, yes, history may be written by the victor, but African history is not all written. It's a verbal, vocal history that we've shared over the, I don't know, past how many 100 years, by means of songs, by means of talking, by means of relating to one another. And those things can't be taught in a book. Some of those things are grounded in being African. You have to be like African to fully engage with what it means to be African. And that means these, as I say, verbal traditions in which me and you have been taught that umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu doesn't have to be written down, but they are truly African values which we can find in our vocal culture and in the way we live in our inherited lives also.
So what makes one an African? Is it the skin color? Is it being black? Or is it being like born within Africa? What makes one African?
Well, this is a sticky question, but the best answer I can give you is if you have an experience of that is uniquely African, and your worldview, the way you look at the world, is also uniquely African. I know these are just words, but that makes you African. So if we share a certain history, we don't have to share a skin color, we don't have to share a surname, we don't have to share a tradition. But if we share a lived experience, which is African, I think me and you can say we are Africans.
Please do join in the conversation on Twitter at UJFM, at Smevzinto, hashtag The General Public Affair, hashtag African Insights. But for now, the time is exactly 7:30, and it's time for us to take a young music break. And we will be back reading your tweets and taking any of your questions before we get into the Classic Generation feature, which is the General Public Affair of the evening. But for now, good music, good vibes coming your way.